There's a reason why MMA is one of the most watched sports out there, and it's not only because of the fighters match inside the cage, but also because of the events that take place leading up to the matches, especially during the weigh-ins. Speaking of weigh-ins, what are the most insane weigh-in moments in MMA? Well, stay tuned because we're about to dive into some of the most insane moments right now. First, we have Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir at UFC 100. Back in 2009, UFC 100 was the most highly anticipated event in the MMA industry, and it's all thanks to the animosity between Brock Lesnar and Frank Mir. It served as the biggest card at the time since fans were looking forward to Lesnar's revenge, seeing as how Mir got the better of him at UFC 81, when Mir defended Lesnar by way of knee bar. Of course, Lesnar didn't stay down and continued fighting and even won 2 fights, which included a win over Randy Couture before the two found themselves facing each other again. Lesnar was MMA's biggest star at the moment, and with UFC gold at stake, the event was made bigger than ever. There wasn't any rowdy crowd nor electrifying tension in the air as people had thought there would be, but there was definitely tension. As a showman known for many antics, it was pretty surprising seeing Lesnar's muted demeanor, and he only had this to say to Mir: "It's all over but the crying." With only a few words, Lesnar managed to stir the crowd at their weigh-in, and it all stemmed from their previous bout. Like we said earlier, Mir managed to win over Lesnar using a knee bar, but Lesnar fully believed that it was all just a fluke. And with both men trash-talking each other to the days leading up to the fight, it was pretty hard for UFC fans to choose a side to cheer on when the event came around. Ronda Rousey versus Bethe Correia at UFC 190. Ronda Rousey enjoyed the popularity and attention she received on and off the cage. At UFC 190, her 9-0 record was more impressive, but at the time it was getting hard finding opponents for this champion, until Bethe Correia. She may not have found a challenger in her home country, but her fight on foreign soil was also pretty hyped up, especially since she's not one who usually leaves her home court. So Rousey packed her bags and flew to Brazil to face the challenge. When she arrived, Rousey received mixed reactions, which weren't uncommon considering more Brazilians are loyal to their fighters while others are in awe of a UFC champion within their lands. All the while, Correia had been talking big, never missed an opportunity to air her comments and concerns, and with her fans behind her, she felt invincible. Finally, the weigh-ins came, and surprisingly, the audience present at the time booed both fighters, which were replaced by cheers the moment they stood face to face. As Rousey got off the weighing scale, she stood in front of an agitated and angry Correia for a stare-down, and this moment was forever captured in the eyes of many as the most iconic stare-downs in UFC history. Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz at UFC 196. The weigh between Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz also makes it to today's list, seeing as these two are some of the loudest trash talkers in the MMA industry. Originally, McGregor was supposed to fight Rafael dos Anjos, but the latter pulled out due to an injury and Nate Diaz stepped in despite a mere 12-day notice. Even before this announcement, Diaz already expressed his interest in fighting McGregor after the Irishman upstaged Michael Johnson on a UFC on Fox card, which also featured dos Anjos. After this event, Diaz started hurling insults left and right, which became a whole lot bigger in the days leading up to their fight thanks to media. During their weigh-in, Diaz was already on stage awaiting McGregor, who went about his usual strut, but UFC President Dana White was ready to defuse the situation should it escalate to a full-blown fistfight. White positioned himself in between McGregor and Diaz, but White's human barrier didn't stop Diaz from pulling up a classic fake to McGregor over the UFC president, which resulted in the Irishman flinching. As we all know, McGregor prides himself on being the ultimate trash talker and mind games, but for once, Diaz got the better of him this time around. Today's list also includes one of the famous weigh-ins that was a premonition to a certain female UFC fighter. To know who it is, keep on watching. Anderson Silva versus Chael Sonnen at UFC 148. As the main event at UFC 148, the bout between Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen was a match you don't want to miss. Silva has already established his name in the industry, and the same goes for Sonnen, but in all honesty, fans of the sport are looking forward to Sonnen getting the beating of his life. Sonnen, who's titled the People's Champ, is also known for his potty mouth. This trash talker was quite something since he has a way to get under both the fans and his opponent, and Silva was on the hot seat. During Sonnen's media tour, he did nothing but hype himself up while downplaying Silva, but the latter kept his cool and remained collected as Sonnen continued his tirade of words. When their weigh-in came, Sonnen thought he'd still be running his mouth against his opponent, but what Silva did got the crowd wild and Sonnen was stunned. As the two stepped onto the stage to do the routine stare down, Silva got real close to Sonnen and clapped back at him with the chin check and didn't stop there. As he continued to lean in, Silva hit Sonnen's cheek by bumping his shoulder quickly, then stepped away, taunting Sonnen, who stood frozen in his position. With the crowd's loud cheering, it became one of the most iconic weigh-ins in UFC history. What happened with Ronda Rousey and Holm at UFC 193? Ronda Rousey's meteoric rise at UFC has been nothing short of spectacular, but this fighter got all her victories into her head, which also served as her downfall. One such example of Rousey being too arrogant for her own good is during UFC 193. At the time, she's matched against Australia's Holm and took a flight down under to meet her competitor for the UFC's Women's Bantamweight Championship. Before Holm, Rousey had just won her fight against Bigg Riggs and was still reeling from her victory, which fueled her arrogance all the more. Contrary to Rousey's actions, Holm exhibited quiet confidence and humility. The Australian, dubbed as the Preacher's Daughter, was very focused on their fight, and not much noise was made by her fans nor her team as well. Knowing who Ronda is, Holm also showed great respect to the fighter, but we wish we could say the same to the latter since Rousey just thought of her as just another regular opponent. However, despite the odds stacking up against her, Holm and her team believed that they stood a chance, which many considered delusional. In the days leading up to the fight, it was clear that a calm demeanor from Holm's camp is getting under Rousey's nerves, and it didn't take long for her to snap at their weigh-ins. As she got off the scale, Rousey did her routine strut towards her opponent, and as she drew close to Holm, she tried to put her hand on the Australian, but Holm was far quicker and beat her to the punch that led to a tussle. And if that wasn't embarrassing enough, she tried to overhook to shrug off Holm's hand, but it ended up with Rousey hitting her own face. Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort weigh-ins at UFC 126. Finally, we have the two biggest names in MMA, Anderson Silva and Vitor Belfort. If you ask any MMA fan, we'll be sure they'll tell you what happened at UFC 126 is one for the books, which also includes their weigh-ins before the fight. At the time, Silva was enjoying his reigns as the UFC champion, so having another fighter from the same country to challenge his title got fans wild. As both Brazilians who are owning the game, Silva and Belfort have given their country so much pride, and at some point were even close to friends and trained together. Perhaps it got a little too into his head, but Belfort took it a little too far and took a jab at Silva, calling him fake and that he wears a mask in front of others to hide his true colors. But this comment felt a little too personal, even from an objective standpoint. Belfort wasn't criticizing Silva's fighting skills, it was Silva's personality which he didn't take lightly. As both fighters stepped onto the stage to face each other after their weigh-ins, Silva suddenly pulled a mask and pulled it over his face, and the crowd went wild. The Brazilian champion obviously heard what Belfort had to say, which caught him by surprise. With his mask on, Silva squared up and bumped Belfort forehead to forehead on stage, which created so much tension inside the room. It didn't stop there, since Silva also gave an outstanding performance inside the cage, which put Belfort in his place, which made it one of the most iconic finishes in UFC history. And with that, we're wrapping up today's episode of the most insane MMA weigh-in moments in history. Which ones did you like the best? Let us know in the comments down below, and before you go, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.